Hi, my name is Jan Neuspiel, and I'm the owner of Island Alpine Guides and one of the guides with the company. So in this segment, we're going to look at various belay methods for multi-pitch climbing and the advantages and disadvantages of each method. So let's look a little bit now at how we manage belay stations and some of the principles around that. The first thing I want to talk about is what we'll call the focal point of the anchor. And I think it's important, and you'll see why as we cover more things in these videos, to connect your anchors up into a single point that is the place where all of the action is, if you will, what we'll call the focal point. You may find videos online other places or meet people that like to do things like use their climbing rope as part of the creation of their anchor. And that is possible. You can do that, and it can work, but it comes with some attendant problems that I think you want to avoid. Not the least of which is if your climbing rope is part of the anchor, you really limit your opportunities in terms of, let's say, for example, the second comes up and you thought that they were going to lead the next pitch, but they're not feeling up to it. Well, how do you get yourself out of the anchor to lead the next pitch if your climbing rope has got you tangled up into it? That's one example. Another one would be in a rescue scenario. If your climbing rope is actually part of your anchor, you're setting yourself up for a whole bunch of trouble. So I'm going to recommend that you build your anchors using materials to come to a focal point, and then you're going to attach yourself to and from that focal point with the climbing rope. So when I've finished a pitch of climbing, the first thing I want to do is secure myself, and what I'm going to do that is attach a locking carabiner to the focal point of the anchor, and then use the climbing rope to attach myself. And I could use, just a figure eight on a bite to do that. But the knot I actually prefer to use is a clove hitch. And the reason I like the clove hitch is that I can connect myself and be secure, but I can also still adjust my distance from the anchor without becoming unsecure, because the clove hitch, of course, is adjustable without being undone. So clove hitch is really my preferred method. Once I'm connected, of course, I shout to my belayer, "I'm secure!" They take me off belay, and then there's typically going to be some slack rope between us. I'm going to pull that rope in. I have a couple of choices. If there's a big enough ledge where I'm belaying, then the simplest thing is probably just to stack that rope on the ledge. If there's any concern that that rope could fall off and end up down below us, in rock climbing, we don't want that to happen, because it's quite possible that when we're belaying somebody on the following pitch, that rope then gets caught on something. So if there isn't a big enough ledge, then probably your next best option is to lap coil the rope over your tie-in, like this. And that's a way to stack the rope without having it fall down onto the crag below. So then the next thing we want to talk about is the various belay methods that we might choose. And each of them has advantages and disadvantages. So we'll look at each one individually and talk about those advantages and disadvantages. Probably the simplest thing that a person might think of doing is belaying directly from their harness. Really common. It's what we know how to do, because that's how we often belay when we're top roping or when we're belaying a leader. I'm actually going to say that doing so on a multi-pitch rock climb, when you're belaying a second up a pitch, is usually not a good idea, because there are more disadvantages to this than there are advantages. The main disadvantages are, if I put my partner on belay directly off my harness when they're climbing up from below me, if that person falls, that load comes straight onto me and becomes very uncomfortable and difficult to manage. Okay? So that's a big disadvantage of belaying them straight off your harness. Really, the only advantage that I could suggest for belaying straight off the harness when somebody's coming up below you is if for some reason you feel that you need to offer some support and protection to a substandard anchor. So you may be saying to yourself, what do you mean? I'm not climbing on substandard anchors. Why would I build lousy anchors? Absolutely true. You don't want to build lousy anchors. The fact is, sometimes when you're exploring, you're climbing new routes, you're climbing in the mountains, in the alpine. For for whatever reason, sometimes you're going to end up with a less than optimal anchor. And it may be that body positioning, maybe with a pinnacle between your legs or feet into good stirrups on the rock, that body positioning is something that you can do to offer some support to the anchor. And in that case, belaying straight off your harness might make a lot of sense because your body is part of the anchor. But in any other situation, I think the disadvantages of belaying straight off the body outweigh the advantages.